Ryan, prior to last night, when we last saw Connor McDavid in this building, it was game 2. McDavid absolutely took that game over. We haven't really seen a follow-up from that. In fact, last night, when you look at all of the Oiler big guns, McDavid, Draisaitl, Hyman, and even Evan Bouchard, they were a combined -8. What's wrong?
Yeah, great question, Farhan, and I think they're kind of asking themselves that a little bit. We chatted with Leon Draisaitl today. He says that he's not tired, although I don't know if any athlete at this stage is going to admit that they're tired. Yeah. But to me, they did look tired in that game. And so if you kind of follow the evidence here, McDavid, 1 assist in his last 3 games. Zach Hyman, 0 points in his last 3 games. Well, what happened in games 2 and game 3, right? Their minutes shot through the roof. And it wasn't until game 4 that Chris Knoblauch started to spread it around a little bit. So to my eye, it looked like perhaps the Oilers big minute guys were somewhat gassed. Now for Connor McDavid, you know, performances like this are rare. It doesn't happen often, but it's a couple of times now. And I also wonder if maybe there isn't something health-wise there. We know coming into the playoffs he was banged up, and playing big minutes like that I think could potentially tweak injuries as well. So when there's a lack of McDavid explosiveness in a playoff game, it definitely leads you down that path. But bottom line, everybody plays a little banged up in the playoffs. Their big guns have not been good enough, Farhan. The power play was a big indicator of that, and I think getting outworked, which is just not acceptable. So some soul-searching required here for the Oilers. They cannot be lackadaisical as they start the next game. And the Canucks with a great chance, Farhan, to show some killer instinct, quite frankly. How is this group at seizing when they have teams, you know, in a tough spot?
Well, they don't have a lot of experience with this particular group, but they are 1-0 in these playoffs. And I go back to Game 6 against Nashville. They had an opportunity on the road to get that done, and they did it. You know, and when you look at just how this team responds in those situations, that game in particular, a scoreless game, the pressure is amping up. You get into the final 2 minutes before Vancouver finally scores to get that series done. But more than anything, I think this Canuck team is very calm in pressure situations. They have played in 9 straight one-goal games. This entire series has been a one-goal game, and if they get down 2, they're still calm in that moment, and they believe they can still come back. So they haven't necessarily had a lot of closeout experiences in the playoffs like maybe the Edmonton Oilers have, but nonetheless, when they get into high-leverage moments, it certainly seems like they can deliver. Now, Calvin Pickard has delivered for 2 games. I know they lost in the last game, but you certainly can't blame any of the goals on Pickard. But is there a case to be made that maybe a change happens?
Well, I mean, we asked Chris Knoblauch this morning, and he wouldn't commit either way. But we also asked him for, you know, how he felt about Calvin Pickard's play, and he was extremely complimentary, saying they gave them a chance to win in both of the games. So if he gave you a chance to win, why would you go the other way? The only thing I can think of is that he has not started in back-to-back-to-back games in a long time, like years we're talking here. So maybe they question that, but with the series on the line, can you leave your franchise goaltender, you know, your starter sitting on the bench for a 3rd consecutive game? That's an incredibly difficult decision to make. But if this boils down to who gives you the best chance to win that game, based on the evidence, which is what's happened on the ice, it's Calvin Pickard for me.
Yeah, and as far as the Canucks are concerned, Thatcher Demko's yet to practice with the team. I fully expect Artur Shilovs to get another start. Ryan, meanwhile, when you look at potential changes for Edmonton, you know, we saw what Vancouver did in the last game, and, you know,
they changed a lot.
Well, they changed,
and it all worked.
Yeah, and you know, when you look at the changes, it ironically impacted the bottom of their lineup more than the top. Certainly, we saw more out of Elias Pettersson, but that 4th line, which hadn't played together, you know, at any point in these playoffs, really stepped up. None of them played more than 10 minutes, but they were important minutes, and they wound up being on the ice for 2 goals. Is there a case or a potential option for Edmonton to have a similar impact?
So here's the problem with Edmonton's options up front. The guys that are sitting there that have been healthy that can come in would be Sam Carrick, right? A penalty-killing, physical, robust forward, not the fleetest of foot. Sam Gagner, right? A heart and soul guy that maybe adds a different dimension of skill to the bottom 6. Respectfully, not the fleetest of foot. So depending on who you're taking out, either of those changes potentially slow the team down a little bit. And I could see them not wanting to do that. Now, perhaps Corey Perry would be a candidate to come out of the lineup, but these moments, that competitiveness, are the reason that Corey Perry is here. There's one that could just fall in their lap, and that's if Adam Henrique is healthy enough to play. I think they made a bit of a mistake. He came back too early in this series and did not look good, and he has not played since. But if he's healthy, I could see them injecting him in. I would view Perry as a candidate to come out in that case. veteran presence, can kill penalties, can play center or the wing. They traded for this guy at the deadline to be a big addition for this moment, Farhan, but so far hasn't had a big chance to contribute here, so that's one that I could potentially see. But the back end, I think, will stay largely the same, although Mattias Ekholm's not well. He's sick. We saw him change after 15 or 20 seconds right before that, kind of an ill-timed change, so maybe something on the back end or going with 7 defensemen.
Yeah, I mean, I can't see a scenario where Ekholm's not in the lineup. He'd have to be really sick given how important he is. But, for me, we talk about the changes that Rick Tocchet made and the impact it had on Elias Pettersson, and you certainly heard the crowd going, "Let's go, Petey," which you kind of wonder about, that the crowd needs to get him going because they were kind of feeling bad for where he was at in the game. But another player that maybe we didn't talk about a lot was Filip Hronek. He has been very quiet in these playoffs, and I think we all kind of felt that maybe when Tocchet was discussing the players that needed to get it going, that it was just bottom end forwards. I think it was also Filip Hronek. He has been very quiet playing alongside Quinn Hughes, and I thought he played his best game of the playoffs. And there were some moments earlier in this series where you could tell Hronek didn't want to get hit. Maybe he's playing through an arm injury, we're not sure, but he was so much more engaged. He was so much more decisive. He was willing to shoot. So if he can build on that, along with Pettersson building on that, I think the Canucks are in good shape. One other player and matchup I wanted to talk to you about was JT Miller, because we talked about what wasn't going. So in this series, JT Miller has spent 47 minutes and 22 seconds in 5-on-5 head-to-head time against McDavid. In that time, the Canucks have outscored the Oilers 2-0. McDavid hasn't been on the ice for a goal when he's faced JT Miller at 5-on-5. Now, if you're Chris Knoblauch, you have never had to worry about matchups, even on home ice. You just roll your best guys out, and that's the way it is, because who's better than McDavid?
Right.
Who's better than Draisaitl? However, in this situation, back home with the last change, does he potentially look at getting him away from Miller?
Yeah, you might want to look at that. I think so. Like McDavid, it's been a struggle at even strength. Excuse me. So I definitely think he could consider that when you have last change, and especially considering the fact that he and Leon Draisaitl are playing on separate lines. So, with those two split up, Miller's going to face one of the two top lines, I would say. I'm not sure that there's another line that is great to go up against JT Miller. The fourth line has been able to handle some shifts. Matthias Janmark, Derek Ryan, and Connor Brown. The odd shift against Miller, they've done well. I don't think you want to hard match that. So, yeah, I could see Chris Knoblauch looking to juke and jive a little bit around that matchup. Like, look, this last game was a massive game. And we came out of that game not talking about the Oilers stars, talking about JT Miller. JT Miller was the standard in that game for gamesmanship, competitiveness, timing. I mean, this guy is a high-end player. And now the narrative becomes, how are the Oilers going to deal with JT Miller? That was not the case coming in.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you look at JT Miller, I was told he was dealing with something in Game 5, and we're seeing a lot of that, right? I mean, I was told at one point earlier in the series a bunch of Canuck defensemen were playing sick. That seems to be running through. When you get into this, let's finish up and talk about pressure. Because the Canucks have come into this series, and yeah, they were the top team in the Pacific Division, but everybody picked Edmonton to win this series. This is a fourth go-around with a playoff run with this Edmonton Oiler core. A lot of pressure on this team.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And there's a lot riding on this season. No question. They've been in this situation and they've done well with it before. So they're experienced and they can fall back on that experience. But no question, the pressure's ratcheted up. There's just no way, Farhan, that we can be talking about an Oiler team that for whatever reason didn't have jump. There is no way. And I'm going to fall back on something that I've kind of been harping on this entire series, and that is physicality. I think physicality is something that you can bring to the table early to make sure you're engaged in the game. The Vancouver Canucks have done it consistently. Game after game, they've brought that physical energy. Chris Knoblauch is not a coach that I don't get the sense really drives that point home with his players. They want to check with their legs and check with their sticks. There isn't a big focus on finishing checks and being physical. I think tactically it's a way to get your team engaged early in games, and I think the Canucks, frankly, are better at it. And I think the Oilers need to do a better job of coming out and engaging early, because it's something you can do under the weight of that pressure. It's something you can get done every single shift. I think it's important. We'll see. But last game, the Canucks had the puck more of the night and also dominated the Oilers on the statistics hit-wise as well.
Yeah, and we haven't seen that in Edmonton because Edmonton has carried the puck. Vancouver's been able to be more physical, so we'll see. Do you dump it in a little more rather than trying to carry it in and trying to skate?
Well, and if you sense this Oiler team is banged up or they're tired, I mean, if you're on that Vancouver bench last night and you're watching those guys, you're probably saying to each other, these guys are gassed. Keep hitting them. So we'll see how the Oilers can manage their rest. So there was no skate today. They did a quick media availability and flew. It's an early game tomorrow, so I wonder what we'll see in the morning. They don't generally like, Farhan, to have it go 2 days without skating before pregame warm-up. So I'll be really interested to see if Connor McDavid and some of the big minute guys are on the ice tomorrow morning for an optional skate or not. If they're not, we'll have our answer about whether or not they're tired.
Meanwhile, a massive game. These two teams came into this series without really having any level of playoff rivalry. That has absolutely changed over the last 5. Game 6 should be a thriller.